Hey everybody, Ryan here, coming at you with another episode of Ryan Cinematic Obsessions. As you can tell, I'm out hitting the trails. I've been doing that a lot this week. So this week is going to be a different Ryan Cinematic Obsessions. Since I haven't really been home, I'm doing something different. There is a video that I uploaded on the Blu-ray Brothers channel about a year and a half ago where I talk about my history of loving film that really wasn't seen by a bunch of people except on that channel, that I want to share with you, because I was going to talk about it, but I was like, you know what, I did this video a while back that I didn't upload to this channel, and I really want to show it to you guys. So today's episode is going to be that special. It's going to be talking about my history with loving film and how it really all started with war films and my love of war films in general. So that's today on Ryan Cinematic Obsessions. Hey everybody, welcome to my War Week themed video. I couldn't even, this is not a week that I could even fathom about doing just one movie. Because, if you guys haven't heard or seen me talk about it before, war films is really what got me into movies in general. I've loved movies my whole life, and I've always had a connection to film, but I didn't actually start looking at film seriously until I got into war films. And you know how we all reach that point in our lives, we could think about that time when we started watching something seriously or starting reading something seriously. Well, that's kind of how war films was. I was always obsessed with movies as a kid, but I did not start looking at it in a serious light until I was, I would say third grade. And so what I wanted to do with this video is do a little something special, and I'm going to kind of take you on a journey of the first days of me loving film the way I do now. So I'm actually on, I'm hanging out in my old neighborhood in Jacksonville Beach, Florida, and I'm getting ready to start with part one of this story, and that is at my old elementary school. And so I'm actually driving up on it right now, and there's a story of how that started. Yeah, right here, I'm actually right now passing my old elementary school. And this is actually where, it's where I started my, I was always into history. And I always loved reading about history. I'm going to kind of do a UE, and then I'm going to, park down the street from the school while I talk about it. I was always into history. And I had family that were in the military. And I, always loved hearing, war stories, I guess you could say. And so from an early age, I remember always watching, war movies and stuff. Sands of Iwo Jima. A lot of the John Wayne type war films, I guess you could say war yarns of the 40s and 50s. And I didn't really remember a lot of them because I was really, I was really young when I did that. Probably 4 or 5, and I really don't remember that far back. But, yeah, so when I was in, I would say, third grade at this elementary school, I actually was in the library one day, and I was just looking at the history books, and I came across a World War II book that was, I would say, about D-Day. I don't know if it was necessarily D-Day or not, but yeah, I can't remember if it was about D-Day. So, but here's the school right there. Yeah, so I think it was about D-Day, and the front cover was just a black and white picture of Normandy, Omaha Beach, I mean, it was Omaha. I'm pretty sure it was Omaha Beach. I don't think it was Sword or Juneau or any of those beaches, but I'm pretty sure it was Omaha because it had the American soldiers. And so I was like, whoa, that's pretty awesome. And I rented it and I brought it home, and all of a sudden I was just completely intoxicated with what I was reading. I was like, man, wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of things. I mean, it was really only 40 or 50 years before that. More like 50 years before that. But yeah, I mean, it was just insane reading about it, and I was just completely intoxicated. Well, my dad saw me reading about it, and he was like, you're just now, starting to learn about that, getting into that. You didn't have to go all the way to you didn't have to go to your school library to read about it. And I was like, what are you talking about? And so he walked me into, I guess you could say it's his, it was his office area where he kept all of his storage and everything. And you guys will probably know what I'm talking about if you know what books I'm referring to. But Time Life came out with these books that were, I would say they're about 200 or 300 pages, probably 8 by 11 in terms of size, and they were hardbacks, and there's probably about 30 of them, 30 or 40 of them, and they were all about different aspects of World War II. Well, I just started reading up on those, and I was just obsessed, and I literally just became obsessed with learning about World War II. And then that kind of leads to the next part of the story, where it was like a family tradition where every Friday night we would go get ice cream, or we would go out to eat, and then I would go to Blockbuster and rent. My brother would rent a video game, and I would rent a movie. And so I'm actually right now pulling up at my old Blockbuster that I really got into film at right now. Here we go. Here is my old Blockbuster. It's actually been closed down for about 10 years now, I would say. And man, that was a sad day when they closed. This was my life, and this place was the place to be on Friday nights, Saturday nights to rent movies. But it's funny, I would say on this half of the store right here was the drama and action section. And it was in that section where I was walking along one night, and I actually had just gotten done. If you look way back there in the back, there's, let me see if I get my finger just right. Right here, there's a pizza place there now. But it was a Mongolian barbecue place, and my family knew the owners, and we went there all the time, every Friday night. And, it was so funny. It always took me so long to pick out movies that my family always joked around and said, I didn't eat dessert. They're like, well, we'll eat dessert. You go ahead and walk across the street. Be safe about it. Walk across the street to Blockbuster and go ahead and start looking, because it took me at least an hour to look, because I looked at everything. Like I still to this day when I go to Movie Stop. And so I was probably about 4th grade, and I was walking around in the drama action section, which is where they kept all the war films, and I came across the VHS of The Longest Day, which it's a 1962 film, 48 international stars, all about the invasion of Normandy. And it's kind of filmed in a docudrama kind of way, where it's, it has a narrative, but it's it's almost like documentary style. But great film. But the front cover of the VHS was pretty much, it was just soldiers, getting out of the landing vehicles on Omaha Beach, and I think it was Henry Fonda that I think was getting out of. I forgot who was getting out of it, but Henry Fonda, it had his name on it. But it was just that, and I was like, man, that's the same as the picture that I had that, was on that World War II book. So I was really excited, and I was like, I gotta rent this movie. I went to go grab it, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's 2 tapes. It's 2 tapes. This is gonna be an epic movie. So I rented it. My dad was like, oh, that's an oldie but a goodie. And went home, and I was obsessed. I watched it twice. 3-hour movie. I watched one night, and then I watched it the next morning. Oh my gosh, I was just blown away by it. So then I returned to Blockbuster the next day. I never went to Blockbuster twice in one weekend, but this weekend I did. And I went, and I was like, man, that looks like the guy, or I was looking at a movie cover, and I was like, that looks like the guy that was the captain in Titanic. And like I said, I was always a history buff, so I was huge into Titanic history. And, the White Star Line, like, history and ship history and submarines and stuff. I always read about all that stuff. The Titanic I'm referring to was the Titanic miniseries that came out a couple years before the James Cameron film that had George C. Scott as, the captain, Captain Smith. And so I saw Patton, and I was like, oh my gosh, George C. Scott. He is the captain in Titanic, and he was also the grandfather in Angus, another one of my favorite movies at the time. So I was like, I gotta get that movie. It was that iconic shot of him standing in front of the American flag, getting ready to make that speech at the beginning of the film. And I saw that movie, and I was blown away by it too. I was like, man, another 3-hour movie. I watched it twice. I watched The Longest Day on Friday night and Saturday morning. I watched Patton Saturday night and Sunday morning. And, woo! From then on out, I just started renting every single war film I could get my hands on. So that's pretty much the hit. I mean, it ended up being like Stalag 17, Bridge on the River Kwai. I mean, it went down the list. And I think the third film, though, was The Great Escape with Steve McQueen and Richard Attenborough. And so let's just say that started my love of film. I really started looking at film seriously. And what I mean by that was I used to just look at films for entertainment purposes. I just was looking at films to be entertained. When the war movie thing started, I was not even just looking to be entertained. I was looking to be informed, and not necessarily informed in the way of like everything that I'm watching is completely factual. Just being informed by opening up my mind to the other, just more educated ways of, I guess you could say, of thinking and how to look at film. War films dealt with a lot of what is the purpose of us dying for an enemy, that, all that kind of stuff. How war films always have those messages like that. And so it was really when I started thinking of that way, and I was like, all right, cool. What are some other movies that star these guys? The first one was mainly John Wayne, and John Wayne was in Sands of Iwo Jima. And this is funny about that movie, because one of my earliest memories, when I was a really young kid, I used to always get up in the middle of the night, and I'd get in trouble because I wouldn't be asleep, and my mom would always be like, hey, it's just us, we're just out here watching a movie. And I have this vivid memory of when I was a kid, waking up. I mean, I had to have been at least 5. It was one of my earliest memories. And I saw a man get up in a tent and say that his name was Sergeant Stryker. And I never knew, I didn't know it was John Wayne at the time. But when I got older, I knew who John Wayne was, and then I watched Sands of Iwo Jima, and that scene came up when he said, I'm Sergeant Stryker, or, what he says, I'm Stryker, and I was like, oh my gosh, mind blown. I completely had deja vu, and I was like, this is the damn film. This is the film that I watched with my parents when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And I always had that connection. And so I started watching Westerns with John Wayne, because I started taking the actors that were in these war films and seeing the other films that they were in. Then I went to Westerns, and I became obsessed with Westerns. But then that branched out into every other genre of film that I'm into. There's not a genre of film that I do not like to this day. And so I have war films to think of that. And so, that's my war film story. That's my, in fact, The Longest Day and Patton were the first 2 VHSs I bought with my own money. And so, but that's my war story, and when I started looking at cinema story, I guess you could say. So I hope you enjoyed this little history of my love of film, and I guess I will see you in the next part of the video. Okay, I'm having so much trouble deciding which of you 3 I'm going to talk about for War Week. I love every single one of you, but it's just getting really, really hard, and I just cannot decide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you guys into the closet, and I want you to fight until the death. And the last one standing is who I'll talk about. Alright, everybody, I am here coming at you with, I guess I could say my top 26 war films I own. I probably own like at least 100 war films, and, I can't possibly talk about every single one of them, so I just grabbed about 25 of them. Some of them, that are still my favorites, I just don't, for some reason I don't have right now in my collection. I think one of the big ones that I could actually name offhand is Stalag 17, William Holden film, or a film with William Holden in it. It's one of my favorites. I think I traded it on DVD a while back because I was eventually going to get the Blu-ray. And to be honest with you, I'm not even sure if they've came out with the Blu-ray yet. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure they haven't released it like on a good Blu-ray yet. So I've held off on that. But I have about 26 things. Some are a lot of DVDs. Then there's a bunch of Blu-rays. There's some Criterions. Got some documentaries. And these are all war films that I love. And I'm going to start with, I guess you could say, my top 4 or 5 war films. Check this out. I'm drinking out of my Star Wars cup. But anyways. Alright. My number 1 favorite war film is, the one that you guys probably already know because you've seen the first half of the video, and it is The Longest Day. And basically this film is about the invasion of Normandy on D-Day, but it's like, the 24 hours of the actual battle, the preparation, the execution of the battle, and some of the aftermath of the first day. It is a brilliant film, maybe some historical inaccuracies, but for the most part, this film is just straight up brilliant. I love it, and I, loved it growing up. Basically, it's like 3 directors. There's a British director, a German director, and I think an American director. And in order to get the authentic feel of the, the sides of the story, whether you're, German or, English or British or American, they each have their sides of the story, so it doesn't feel biased in that way. So definitely, you guys should definitely check this out. It has 48 international and famous stars. That's how they credit it. Everybody from John Wayne, Robert Mitchum, Henry Fonda, a bunch of people. Kurt Jurgens, bunch of people is in this film. So I highly recommend it. Next is Patton. Amazing film directed by Franklin J. Schaffner and written by Francis Ford Coppola. And this film is just brilliant in how it's told. It starts off as, he's giving that famous, iconic scene. He's giving that speech to the soldiers, and he's almost kind of like giving the speech to the audience. And then you see his campaign during World War II. It doesn't really talk about his whole life. It's just, during the war. And it's really fascinating character study of a really complex man. So I highly recommend this film as well. And these are actually the 2, like I've mentioned in the video before, these were the 2 films, and A Bridge Too Far is another film. But these are 2 films that, including Bridge Too Far, that really influenced me into loving film how I do. So, like I mentioned in the video, the first part of the video. Next is The Great Escape, starring Steve McQueen, James Garner, Richard Attenborough, and it really has an all-star cast. And basically, this is about the, 1943 escape of a bunch of prisoners, the attempted escape, and the escape and the aftermath, and so on and so forth. Brilliant film. I'm probably kind of preaching to the choir when I'm actually talking about it, but I highly recommend this film as well. The next is actually a double feature pack that I have, and it's The Dirty Dozen and Kelly's Heroes. Now, Kelly's Heroes is kind of like a war yarn, I guess you could say. It's kind of a heist kind of feel to it. It's light comedy. It's just a light-hearted kind of war film that has some serious moments, but it stars Clint Eastwood, Telly Savalas, Donald Sutherland, Don Rickles, a bunch of other people. Harry Dean Stanton's in this film, and it's just a really, really fun one. It's always been one of my favorites. I just watched it the other day, and I could really watch it. It's one of those movies I could actually watch on repeat. And yeah, so, and then the next one you have here, The Dirty Dozen. I could probably not even need to, I don't even need to explain that one because everybody has heard of that and been inspired by it in some way. Some filmmakers basically have a dozen prisoners that are given a second chance on a suicide mission, basically, and it just features brilliant performances by Lee Marvin, especially by John Cassavetes in a supporting role, and he was nominated for an Oscar for the film, and it's just a great, great film. Next we have Das Boot, the uncut version. I love the director's cut; it's a masterpiece. But this uncut version, it's like one of those. It's one of those things where when you love a film so much, and if there's an uncut version, I kind of graduated to this. I'll watch the director's cut if I see it, or if I find the Blu-ray for a good price. But until that day comes, this is how I'm gonna be watching it. The uncut 5-hour cut. Basically, it's about German U-boat men during, a mission during World War II, the Battle of the Atlantic, and you get to follow them. Beginning of the movie, clean-shaven, young, clean cut, all that stuff. And by the end of the movie, for authenticity, I don't know why that came out weird. Wolfgang Petersen actually had them grow out beards, kept them out of the sun, and they really, really looked like they were just aged and worn out. It's a masterpiece of a film. I highly recommend it in every form, really. Next, needs no introduction, really, is Schindler's List. This is a really, really great film. Heartbreaking, but very important at the same time. Definitely go this and Shoah are probably like my favorite Holocaust-themed films. Yeah, this is just a masterpiece. Unfortunately, I have not bought the Blu-ray yet. I really want to. This is actually, I hate it because of it, but it's actually the Fullscreen DVD. When it came out on DVD, Walmart for some reason did not have the widescreen, and so I bought the Fullscreen. So I just, whenever I watch it, I kind of act like I'm not, or I kind of, imagine it's not full screen even though it is. So, because, I'm not really into that whole, I really hate full screen stuff. I don't like watching films outside of the aspect ratio that it was actually supposed to be shown in. Next, we have The Big Red One. This is the reconstruction version. Samuel Fuller's war masterpiece, starring Lee Marvin, Mark Hamill, Robert Carradine, Kelly Ward, and a bunch of other people. And basically this film is about the 1st Infantry in World War II, and they're basically going through the whole war. You follow them through the war, and it's an epic film. It's almost like 3 hours long, but the thing is, Samuel Fuller was the guy behind it, and he is such a great filmmaker. And it has a very personal and, real, not necessarily real, but a personal feeling to it and closeness to it, because he doesn't use huge, sets, huge sequences. It's very small and intimate and very low budget. And so when you're watching this, you might be like, man, this movie's kind of boba, kind of cheap. That's not it at all. It's just, it was made on a lower scale. And it just really adds to the film, I think. It gives it charm because of that. And, yeah, I highly recommend this. Mark Hamill is brilliant in this film. I love it. Lee Marvin's really good, too, but Mark Hamill, I think, steals the show. And this is one of the films that actually shows that he's more than just Luke Skywalker. He's more than just, the Joker. He is this character. He is a soldier who, has convictions as well, and really can be complex. And I just think it's a great performance by him. Next is The Deer Hunter. Robert De Niro, Christopher Walken, Meryl Streep in the Michael Cimino film. Basically, it's about, a group of friends in a small town that it just shows how their lives are impacted over the Vietnam conflict. And it's just a devastatingly powerful film. very slow for those of you who aren't really into like slow moving stuff. It's very slow to start out with, but I promise you it's brilliant. I love every single second of it. Dang it, my battery's running low on my camera. Next we have Robert Altman's MASH. It's a nice comedy, kind of a dark comedy war film, slightly dated but still fun. I highly recommend it. How can I talk about war films without mentioning Buster Keaton's The General? This film is just, sight gags, comedy, and you guys have seen Luke's video already, so I'm not going to go more into this, but it's just a brilliant film. Next is Saving Private Ryan. I still have it on DVD. I don't have it on Blu-ray yet, but eventually I will. Steven Spielberg masterpiece. Great film. This is definitely one of my favorite courtroom films, I guess you could say. And it is Judgment at Nuremberg. And basically it's about just a trial going on in Nuremberg. Not the actual big trial that happened there, but it's basically I think it's a fictional trial. But it just is powerful anyways, because it just talks about the atrocities that some of the officers of Nazi Germany, just some of the atrocities they did, and it's a really powerful film. A huge cast: Spencer Tracy, Burt Lancaster, Richard Widmark, Judy Garland, Maximilian Schell, who is amazing in this film, and he won Best Actor Oscar for this film. And Montgomery Clift, in a really tragic performance, because you could see in his face that he's really struggling in his real life with all of his stuff, and it just really showed in the performance. Next is The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. Basically, this is about a general, or he's a British soldier, Clive Candy, and you're basically visiting with him, or you're with him throughout his life and his whole career in the military. And it just shows how society and life is changing. It is a brilliant film. The actor who plays Clive Candy is Roger Livesey, I think that's how you pronounce his name. And he was really young when this movie was made, and they made him up to look really old as he aged. And as you can see on the back right there, I mean, he was probably not even 30 years old when this movie was made. But yeah, it's a brilliant film. Next one I'm just going to show. I don't have the Blu-ray yet, but it's All Quiet on the Western Front. Brilliant film. I remember when I first saw it when I was younger. After I read the book, I was just like, man, that is filmmaking right there. And this came out in 1930. So, all right. Before we get into the Blu-rays, I got a couple documentaries I want to show. One is Shoah, I forgot that downstairs. Brilliant Holocaust documentary. Basically, there is no archival footage. It's just interviews by survivors, perpetrators, so on and so forth. Very powerful, devastating to watch, because it is really, really sad. But it's still a great must-own for, history lovers, historians, and teachers, and so on and so forth. The first thing I want to talk about is Ken Burns' documentary. I just dropped something out of here. The War. And basically this is just it takes place in an American town, and they basically just follow some different people in America from different villages or different cities, and they just follow them through the war as they're telling the story of their life during the war. It's kind of talking about America's involvement in World War II. It is simply a masterpiece. And then my all-time favorite documentary ever, I've seen it countless times. It's Ken Burns' 12-hour, I think it's 12 hours, 11-hour documentary on the American Civil War, and it's the Civil War. I have seen this so many times. I love it. I used to watch it on TV all the time, and I just really love all of Ken Burns' stuff. But this one is the ultimate. I at least watch it once a year. It's just brilliant. My voice is starting to go down. Next I'm gonna show, I got so many right here. Full Metal Jacket, Stanley Kubrick's film. I definitely think that basically you follow a character through basic training and then into the war in Vietnam. I think the first half of the film, which is during a basic training, is the stronger half, but I think as a whole it's still a great film. I don't think it's the best war movie ever made, like some people make it out to be. And let me tell you, I mean, Stanley Kubrick is, if not one of my favorite, or not my favorite director, definitely my top 3. And I think this film is great, but not as good as I think Stanley Kubrick could have been at making it. I wish the whole film felt like the first half in terms of what it covered. But still, it's a great film. It's just not the best war film ever made. Next is Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds. Kind of a fictional fantasy set against World War II. And I know you all have, seen this. Next is, as you can tell by the opening of this video, one of my all-time favorite films in my top 20. One of my favorite directors. And just an all-around amazing film, and that is Apocalypse Now. Next is, I guess you could say, 2 films in a Civil War series by Ronald Maxwell. One is Gettysburg, the director's cut, and Gods and Generals, the director's cut. I highly recommend these if you're in the history, especially the American Civil War. Next, we have another one of my top 20 favorite films, Bridge on the River Kwai. It was actually one of the first Blu-rays I ever owned, too. I think I got it within the first month of having a Blu-ray player. And it's still one of my favorite editions of a film. The transfer is just spectacular. It's just a great transfer. Next 2 are a couple Criterion's Blu-rays. First one is Terrence Malick's A Thin Red Line. Not everybody likes this movie. I love it for the poetic, feel that it has. Very philosophical in some ways. And just really amazing to look at. It's just one of those spectacular looking films. Definitely I think it's a masterpiece, and I actually prefer it over Saving Private Ryan. I remember when I was younger, I saw Saving Private Ryan, loved it. And then I saw this. See, I was a lot younger, so I didn't really understand some of the other serious stuff in this film. And as I've gotten older, I prefer it over Saving Private Ryan, which I still think is a great film in its own right, but this, in terms of emotion and what it covers, handles, I think, so much more. So, basically it's about the Battle of Guadalcanal during World War II. As you can tell, most of these things are about World War II, not necessarily just about World War I or Civil War. World War II is like my specialty in regards of loving of war films. Next is Paths of Glory with Kirk Douglas, directed by Stanley Kubrick. Words can hardly explain how this movie is just so powerful, and how it, it kind of makes a statement about why are we fighting this war when the generals who had the argument in the first place are just sitting up in their little, houses pretty much and just telling everybody what to do. And basically this film is an anti-war film in that way, and it's just contains some of the best tracking shots ever put on film, I think. It's just a very great film. As you can tell, I'm kind of losing my voice now. So, I want to thank you guys for War Week, for watching War Week. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed my Apocalypse Now homage at the beginning of the movie, or at the beginning of this video. And I hope you enjoyed my second skit, which I thought was pretty funny too. I think it's some really weird stuff. But anyways, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and have a wonderful day. Alright, well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I'm going to go further down this trail so I can go ahead and see if I can find any animals. And I will see you guys next week for a special Oscar Ryan Simak Obsessions.